animals. So as naturalists at the Balsam Mountain Trust, we think our jobs are pretty cool. We get to spend part of our time out in the wild, hiking around in the forests, and helping to protect the plants and animals that live in the wild. And we get to spend the other part of our time working here at the Nature Center, where we are recording today, taking care of animals that can no longer live in the wild for one reason or another. So today we're going to introduce you to 3 animals.
At least,
yeah. And you'll get to see them up close and personal. And we're going to talk to you today about these animals in the context of food chains. So what they eat and how they do it and how it all fits together. So I want you to put your thinking caps on and think about when you think about a food chain, which is basically just the way energy moves through an ecosystem. Where does the vast majority of that energy come from? If you are thinking about that big burning ball of fire and gas in the sky called the sun, then you are right. We're going to start off our food chain by talking about that primary resource of energy on our planet, the sun. And from there, we're going to move to our first group of living organisms that are able to make their own food using the sun's energy. If you are thinking about the science word producers, then you're right. Producers are able to take the sun's energy and produce their own food. How cool is that? If you're thinking about things like plants, so for example, trees, grass, or if you're thinking about algae, then you're on the right track. All of these living organisms are able to use the sun's energy to produce their own food. Now, anything that can't use the sun's energy or some other energy resource to make their own food are in a different category. And if you're thinking of the science word consumers, then you're right. Consumers, makes sense, have to consume food in order to get the energy they need to survive. There are several types of consumers. There are primary consumers, which eat producers. There are secondary consumers, which eat both producers and other consumers. And then there are tertiary consumers, which are kind of the apex predators, the top of their food chain. We're about to dive into a few other science words related to food chain: carnivore, omnivore, and herbivore. And we're going to help to define them and also see a couple animal examples, and you guys can help me see which category you think they fit into, which kind of eaters they are. Herbivore, these are the ones that eat only plants. Omnivore, like us, eat some plants and some animals. And then carnivores eat only meat. So now we're going to walk through a few biofacts as examples before we meet our live animal friends, so that you can tell me whether you think this animal was a herbivore, an omnivore, or carnivore. So the first one that I have, many of you will guess what this is: a white-tailed deer. Do we think this is an herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore? If you said herbivore, you're right. Deer don't eat any meat. They just eat plant material, and they have these great teeth for being able to grind up the plants. This is the shell of an eastern box turtle, our state reptile. What kind of eater do you think they are? If you said omnivore, you're right. They like berries, they like little new shoots and roots of plants, mushrooms, but they also eat snails and insects. This is another example of an omnivore. And this animal is one of the largest mammals in our region. It is, if you haven't guessed it by the skull, maybe you'll guess it by the fur. A black bear. This is definitely an apex predator. This is the skull of an alligator. You guessed it. And alligators don't eat any plant material. So does that make them an herbivore, an omnivore, or carnivore? If you said carnivore, you're right. These guys are at the top of the food chain. So how many of you guys in here have heard the words food chain before? Okay, awesome. Have you learned about it in school yet this year?
Yes. It's our next
Not
unit.
yet. Okay, maybe this will be coming up, so this will be a good introduction for you guys. So food chain is how energy flows through a system. So how energy is moving through a system. So the majority of the energy in our world comes from one source. What is that source? Everyone can say it if you know it.
The
sun. That's right. The sun. The sun is the primary source of energy. There is a group of living organisms that is able to harness the energy of the sun, kind of like the solar panels you learned about in the last group, to create their own food. What is a type of living thing that can create its own food using the sun? Plants. There are certain types of bacteria that can do this as well. Who knows the science word that tells you about all of the living organisms that can use the sun to make their own food? It starts with a P. Oh, no! Photosynthesis is the process that they use. So you're getting close. Who's heard producers before? Okay, on three, we're going to say that word together. 1, 2, 3. Producers! All right, are you a producer? You, sir. Can you stand in the sun and make your own food? No. If you're not a producer, you are a consumer. Very good. Let's say that together. 1, 2, 3. Consumer. Okay, so if you're not a producer, you are a consumer. Raise your hand if you're a consumer. Yep, we are all consumers. I am so happy that I'm a consumer because I love to eat. Yeah. I'd be sad if I just had to stand in the sun and make my own food. So, there are different types of consumers. Some bacteria are consumers. Fungus are consumers. Are all animals consumers?
Some of them.
They all are.
All of them.
As far as we know, all animals are consumers. They have to take in food to get the energy they need to make their bodies run. They're consumers. There's 3 types of animal consumers we're going to focus on today. One, the group of animals that eat only plant material, like a white-tailed deer. What is the science word for the group of animals that eats only plant material?
Herbivores.
Herbivores. That's right. So this is a deer. We also have things like,
Oh, God.
what's that? Cricket or grasshopper, yeah. That's another type of herbivore. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we have animals that eat only meat, like our mountain lion here. What is the group that eats only meat?
Carnivores.
Carnivores.
Kitty.
We have a couple of other examples. Oh, meow, little kitty. No, he's a big
It's not that little.
Okay. Hold on. Not nice or mean. He's a top predator. This is an owl, rattlesnake, all important carnivores, predators within their ecosystem. In the middle are animals that can eat some plants and some animals. O for omnivores. Raise your hand if you're an omnivore. Yes, we are omnivores. So are, let's listen up. What's this? This is a particular type of turtle that lives in our forest around here. Fox turtle, very good.
My favorite animal.
We also have raccoons. What's this? This? Black bear is a black bear skull. Today, you're going to be meeting 2 carnivores and 1 omnivore. So, what I'm going to ask is that everyone stay silent when we bring out our animals. They are very shy, and we are very big compared to them, and we don't want to scare them, so we ask them to please silence when we bring them out.
cannot be
bird
found, we're going to take you out of this group.
of prey, so a carnivorous bird. Some birds of prey include things like hawks and eagles and falcons. What's a bird of prey that comes out at nighttime?
Owls.
An owl. With us today, we have an owl named Luna. If you think she's cool when we bring her out, show me by putting your thumbs up. Don't say anything. Yeah, I'm glad you think she's cool. I think she's cool too. She's called a barn owl, like the barn behind you. Barn owl. This is the most widespread type of owl in the world. You can find them on every continent except for Antarctica. In Antarctica, it's just too cold for their favorite prey to live, like rodents, like little mice that they love to eat. So what we're going to do today with our live animals is I'm going to have you share with me and Miss Becca some adaptations that these animals have to survive in their world. An adaptation, have you guys heard that word before? Is a body part or a behavior that allows an animal to better be able to survive and reproduce within its environment. All right, we have another carnivore to meet today. This is a type of reptile. Reptiles wear what on the outside?
Python. Tail.
Scales, that's right. This reptile is, let's see, a type of reptile that does not live in our mountains, but lives from Texas all the way up the coast to North Carolina, its northernmost range. It is the top predator in the swamps. It is a baby alligator. Word has gotten around, right? So we have a baby alligator with us today. Miss Becca is going to call on you to share. We're going to choose 4 alligator adaptations that you guys want to talk about today. So raise your hand if you have an adaptation for the alligator. At the end, you'll have the chance to touch. So don't ask about that. Yes.
She has sharp teeth.
Sharp teeth. Do you know that alligators have a really large, what's called bite force? That means they can bite really strong. It would be like the same amount of force as an elephant stepping on your toe. And you know, sometimes they bite so hard that they break some of their teeth. And it's not really that big of a problem because they can grow back new teeth.
Is it a boy or a girl?
We don't know. So at this age, this alligator is about 1 year old. You cannot tell if it's a boy or a girl unless a veterinarian goes into the universal exit hole called a cloaca. When they get larger, you can tell the difference between the male and the female. Any other adaptations that you notice? Yes.
They have a shorter, rounder snout than crocodiles do, so that they can grab land mammals because they eat things like deer and raccoons, but crocodiles mainly eat fish.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What body part do you think is most important for our alligator to swim?
Oh, the tail.
The tail, you're correct. You see that long, strong tail? The tail, because it's all muscle.
There's that chicken in it.
They use their tail to swim. They actually tuck their 4 legs by their sides when they're swimming. They use their webbed feet primarily to walk on mud. Isn't that neat? So let's all go ahead and say goodbye to Buford.
Goodbye, Buford. But wait.
All right, guys, we really could talk about alligator adaptations for like the next 2 days and not get tired of it. So we just shared a couple today, but I encourage you guys to find out more on your own. We need to complete our food chain. We've got producers, we've got consumers, but we've got, the consumers and the producers, they die at some point. We don't have dead stuff piled up. What do we have to get rid of? Decomposers help break down the dead stuff. And you know what? Once that dead stuff's broken down, it goes back into the soil, and guess who uses it to grow healthy and strong? The producers. But then we take advantage of it by eating the plants, right? Yeah, so we got decomposers. Decomposers could be small stuff like bacteria and fungus. Or small animals like worms, exactly.
Or mushrooms.
Oh, we said fungus, yeah, so mushrooms are a type of fungus, right? Or sometimes it can be larger animals that do the beginning breaking down, tearing things apart and starting to eat it. So, can anyone think of, when we talk about a large animal decomposer, we call them a scavenger? Who can name a scavenger?
That's called.
You want some help? I'll come back to you. Here.
A raccoon?
A raccoon is a type of scavenger. Raccoons can also be categorized as omnivores because they eat some live plants and animals as well. Yeah. Vulture is a good one, yeah. Okay, so this scavenger we have today can be categorized kind of like raccoon as a scavenger because it eats dead stuff, or as an omnivore, an opportunistic omnivore. Basically, this animal eats just about anything it comes across. It is a mammal.
A goat.
And, last hint,
Pretty accurate.
not a goat. It is our only North American pouched mammal or marsupial.
Kangaroo! No.
Do we have kangaroos in North America?
No.
Armadillo.
Oh, what do we have?
Kangaroo.
Raise your hand if you know it. Ooh, is a
pouch?
snake a mammal?
No,
Does it have hair or fur?
Flying squirrel.
Not a flying squirrel?
Possum.
A possum. We have a possum with us today. His name is Oscar. Possums are shy. Hey guys. Oh, let's keep those thumbs up if you think he's cool. Let's keep those thumbs up. Now, move your thumbs like this. Oscar has thumbs like we do. He's got opposable thumbs. Check out how he uses them to climb down Becca's leg like a tree. What else does he have that makes him a great climber? His prehensile tail, kind of like a monkey's tail, helps him to be an excellent climber. All right, so possums are great at climbing up trees.
Don't think I did.
What other neat adaptations do possums have? Yeah. Okay, we talked about their tails. What else?
Their snout.
Their snout. What does their snout help them to do?
Sniff.
Sniff. Yep, their most important sense or a way of determining things about their world is their sense of smell. Their eyesight is not very good. So he's smelling for his food right now. Let's talk about the cool adaptations possums have if they're scared. From a distance, possum sees something coming, it's gonna climb up a tree. Backs into a corner. Who's seen a possum go? Yeah, hiss. Here, my big sharp teeth, please go away. Right? But if you surprise a possum or you get too close to a possum, what is that possum going to end up doing?
Play dead.
Play dead. They don't choose to. They get so scared that they faint. So possums are not a threat to us, right? They're not dangerous. They're not something we're going to want to pick up or touch in our backyard, just like any live animal. But they're an animal that is a good neighbor to have. I have two cool reasons why a possum is good to have in your backyard, besides the fact that they're not going to be a danger to you. One, this is the most important one, they're really cute. I like looking at them in my backyard. Two, they eat things I don't want in my house or on my body. They love to eat ticks.
We had one
For
that we
example,
fed
like
cat food
popcorn
to.
and that.
Cat food to for
They
like 2
also
years.
like to eat things like small mice and
just go on the
roaches, which is
porch.
pretty cool.
3 times.
All right, you guys, we are out of time. We're going to go ahead and say goodbye to Mr. Oscar quietly. Bye, Oscar. Good morning. Good morning. I said good morning. All right. What school are you guys? Johnson Valley. Hello, Johnson Valley. So my name is Emily. I'm going to give that a second pass. Wait, hello. Johnson Valley. If there is somebody shorter standing behind you, switch places. Yes. If there is somebody shorter standing behind you, switch places.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Everybody needs to be able to see Bentley.
Yes, make sure you can see me and hear me.
What are you doing?
All right, make sure you guys can see me and hear me. If you can't, please move to somewhere you can. But my name is Emily and I work at Balsam Mountain Trust, which is a nature center and preserve. So, have you guys learned in school about the food system yet? Yeah? Yes, a little bit. Great. So this should be mostly review for you, right? How many of you had breakfast this morning? Quite a few of you. Where did the energy from your breakfast come from? Yeah? The proteins and the sugars and the fibers. But where did those proteins and sugars get their energy from? Yeah? The sun. Exactly right. All usable energy on Earth pretty much comes from the sun. Now the sun is a fantastic, wonderful, ginormous ball of fire in space. And it emits energy to us in a couple of forms, in light and heat. Do you guys know how long it takes for energy to get from there to us? How long? Exactly right, 8 minutes, which doesn't seem like a very long time, but keep in mind, light is the fastest thing we know of, so that is actually a really long way away. So we are going to follow the story of our wonderful proton, which is just a little packet of energy coming from the sun to Earth. Now, when it hits the surface of the Earth, what does that energy do? Does anyone know? What do you think? Yeah, it can either hit not plants and turn into heat, make things warm up, warm us up, warm the ground up, warm our stuff up, or it can hit plants. And when it hits plants, what do the plants do with it? Yeah. Exactly right. They can use that energy to form little sugar molecules. And that is the usable source of energy for everything. Do you guys know the process by which the sun turns, or plants turn the sun into energy? Yeah. Exactly, photosynthesis. Now, can animals just hang out and photosynthesize if they want to? No. Sometimes I feel like I can, but no, I cannot do photosynthesis. So what do we have to do to get our energy? We can't get it directly. Yeah. We have to eat. Exactly right. Now, if that proton is going from the sun to the plant, and they are producing all of the usable energy for animals, we call them producers, right? Because they are producing. I like to remember this because when you're in the grocery store and you're in the produce section, what do you see? You see meat, cheese, bread. What do you see? Vegetables, fruits, plants. Exactly right. So these guys are producing the energy, the food for all the other animals in some way, shape, or form. Now our wonderful proton is hanging out inside this blade of grass. He's just chilling. He's doing cool, lazy grass things, being an awesome grass plant. And along comes a hungry rabbit. And that hungry rabbit eats this grass. What happens to this particle of energy from the grass? What happens to it? Yes? Yeah, it goes into the rabbit. Now, is he a producer or what is he? What is he? A consumer. Now, he's the first line of consumers in our little chain here. So we call him the primary, which means first. We're going to talk about the primary, secondary, and tertiary consumer. But since he's the first, he's the primary. Now, rabbits only eat producers. They only eat plants. So what kind of consumers are they? Are they herbivores, omnivores, or carnivores? What are they? Omnivores. If they just eat plants, only plants, omnivores like to eat everything. Omni means everything. What do you think? They're herbivores. Exactly right. So I'm just going to write a herb right here. Now, this rabbit right here is a herbivore because he only eats plants. He might accidentally eat the occasional bug that's attached to a plant, but that's not what he's going to go for. So he only eats plants, and he is our primary consumer because he's the first thing to eat that sugar. Now, in this rabbit, where is our packet of energy? Where is it?
In the producer.
Yeah, it's in the producer in the rabbit's belly. And that rabbit is going to break down that food to use the energy, right? Kind of like why we eat. So there are three things that this rabbit is going to be using that energy for. Do you guys have an idea of what they are? Yeah, so if a predator eats it, it will have the rabbit in it. So the rabbit's first off going to use that energy to like exist, right? Move, survive, find more food. He's going to actually use it. Another thing that a rabbit can do is he can store it. Anything that's left over, he can store in his body, usually as fat, which will then later get eaten if that is what happens to this rabbit. And what's the third thing that he can do with this energy? Do you know? You trying to think about it? What do you think? he can turn it into feces. That's usually what happens with the nutrients, the matter. But you're right, that does happen to the matter after a while. The energy, though, is something very interesting. What's your body temperature right now? Do you guys remember what the safe human body temperature is, roughly? Yeah. Yeah, about 98 degrees. Some people run a little cooler, some people run a little warmer, but around 98 degrees. What's your body temperature if you're in the Arctic? Yeah.
Probably around
98 degrees, exactly right. We keep our body temperature usually warmer than the surroundings, right? So we produce body heat. We are warm-blooded. Is a rabbit warm-blooded? Yeah, so is he producing body heat? Yeah. And did you know that most of the food we eat gets used as body heat? Of the breakfast you guys had, only 10-ish% of that is actually being used by you today. The rest is either being used as warmth or being stored for later. Isn't that cool? So that proton is doing one of those three things. Let's say this specific one, he is hanging out inside the body of his rabbit, being stored for later. But unfortunately, this rabbit does not have time to use it because along comes a hungry fox. And this hungry fox sees this rabbit and he says, ooh, delicious. I see lunch or dinner or whatever time of day it is. And he eats the rabbit. So if he is eating the rabbit, what kind of consumer is he? What level of consumer? Yes. He is an omnivore, so foxes are omnivores. They eat both plants and meat. Now, he, in this scenario, is just eating the rabbit, but he can also eat producers if he wants to. But is he the primary, secondary, or tertiary consumer? Secondary, because he's eating the primary. And numbers tend to go 1, 2, 3. So he is the secondary consumer. Now what's happened to our unlucky proton now? Where is it? It's in the fox's belly. Yeah, so it went through the plant, was stored by the rabbit, and is being eaten by the fox. And what three things can that fox do with that energy? Yeah.
store it.
He can store it. What else? Yeah. He can use it, or what else? He can turn it into body heat. And so that proton, let's say this unlucky proton, is being stored once again as body fat for later. But again, this is our unlucky proton. So unfortunately, this fox does not have time to use it. Because along comes a hungry cougar. And that cougar sees this fox and he thinks, delicious. I think I'll have a bite. And unfortunately, this cougar does get eaten, or does eat the fox. Now, are cougars herbivores, omnivores, or carnivores? What do you think? They're carnivores, which means they only eat meat, right? And because he is eating a secondary consumer, which level do you think he is? Yeah. Tertiary, the third one down, exactly right. So our carnivore friend is the tertiary consumer. So this carnivore is our tertiary consumer. And where is the unlucky proton now? It's in his belly, getting ready to use. What are the three things that you can use that energy for? Yeah. Body heat. What else?
Energy to survive.
To use it. Exactly. What else? Or you could store it. Exactly. And this unlucky carnivore will store his energy for later. But again, he doesn't have time. Rick Cougar, because he passes away for whatever reason.
He's old.
Nothing comes, well, that's sure, he's old. Nothing comes around to eat him in life, but what happens to him in death? Yeah, he starts decomposing, exactly right. Now, what are some things that will decompose stuff? What are some decomposers? Yeah. Mushrooms, exactly right. Mushrooms are really important decomposers. Also scavengers like vultures and possums and coyotes. And the smaller ones. Oh, what are the smaller ones? Well, we think they're disgusting. We have them in our guts. We call them germs. What are they? Bacteria. Bacteria are also decomposers. And they are really important ones because they're sometimes the last level to break molecules down into their components. When decomposers are done with the body of our poor cougar, what happens to that cougar? Yeah. It's just bones and stuff. And eventually, over the course of a long period of time, it turns into soil. And that soil's nutrients recycle back to producers. And the cycle continues with the nutrients and the matter and the carbon in the world. So that's what happens with the nutrients. That's the nutrient cycle. But what do you think happens with the energy? That unlucky proton, what's happened to him? Now he's been eaten by the decomposers, so some of them are using it, some of them are storing it, and some of them are releasing it as body heat. But what happens to the ones that don't get used or don't get stored by the bacteria? Yeah?
They get recycled and turned into energy, and it continues to happen.
They get recycled back into heat. And unfortunately, that is not necessarily a cycle. That's more of a chain. The sun is the source of the energy, and when things are decomposing, they release heat. And that heat disperses back into the environment, eventually making its way up into space. But it generally does not get reused by the producers. That's just the nutrients. So if the nutrients is a cycle, then the energy is a chain. Does that make sense to you guys? Now this is a complicated process, so if you don't get it, that's okay. Do you guys have any questions on this? There's no silly questions, just silly answers. And I'm full of silly answers. None? Yes?
Is there another level called the quaternary container?
Oh, quaternary, yeah. So in an example chain, you can pretty much go as far as you want. So let's use the example of a blade of grass gets eaten by a mouse. So that's our primary consumer, actually. That mouse gets eaten by a snake, which gets eaten by a fox, which gets eaten by a cougar, which gets eaten by a human. You can keep going until you finish that end, but it'll always end with decomposers. In the end, everything is going to start decomposing, and that will continue in circles. It's just sometimes a longer cycle than this. We just generally only go to third because that's usually how far it goes. All right, so I have some critters that I brought with me, and they're all alive. And we're going to introduce ourselves to as many as we can before we run out of time. But what I want you guys to do while you meet these animals is I want you to try and figure out where on this nutrient cycle or the energy chain these animals will live. So the first animal I want to introduce you to is a small guy. And he is a lovely little bug. Okay, here he is. This is a bug. I know. Now please keep in mind that he's not going to leave my hand, you're not going to touch him, and he's not going to touch you, so there's no reason to freak out. So this is a Madagascar hissing cockroach. And these guys are insects, which means how many legs do they have? 6.
Can you please keep that away from
So I'm just going to come around so you all get a chance. Don't worry, no one's going to touch him. Stay where you are and I'll move around you. So these guys are one of the largest species of non-flying cockroaches in the world. But luckily, you don't have to worry about finding them here. They are not native to North Carolina. They are only native to Madagascar. Do you guys know where Madagascar is? It's a show. It's also a movie. Where is it though in the world? Yeah, it's an island off the coast of Africa. So that's where you'll see these guys naturally. Now these guys really love to eat plants, and they particularly love to eat plants that are rotting on the forest floor. So where on this energy chain do you think they'd live? Yeah. You got it, yes. So they can be a primary consumer. In managed care or captivity, we like to give these guys vegetables, and they really love fruit. He is particularly fond of apples. But in the wild, they don't always have access to fresh fruit, so they will eat old fruit. So in that case, where do you think they fall? Okay, that's okay. What do you think?
Decomposers.
Decomposers, yeah. A lot of bugs are very important decomposers. Cockroaches, worms, some ants. These guys help break things down into smaller components so they can be turned back into soil. So the next animal I'd like to introduce you to is this little gal right here. Now I'm not going to take her out of her container for a couple of reasons. She is an amphibian. And does anyone know a really interesting adaptation that amphibians have with their skin? Their skin. What do you think? Yes, some have very bright skin. That means don't touch me, I'm poisonous. And she's a toad, and many toads do have a very light toxin on their body that's secreted by little glands behind her head. I'll actually take this off so you can see her better. But her level of toxin is not something I have to worry about. The real reason I don't want anyone touching her is because amphibians have very porous, thin skin. And that skin is very, very good at absorbing things. Now, I don't know what you guys have touched today. I personally have had sunscreen and sanitizer on my hands, and that stuff can get her too sick. She will only eat other consumers. Now, the consumers she eats are usually primary consumers. So what does that make her? Secondary consumers. Because she eats insects. And at home at the nature center, her favorite thing is mealworms. Who loves mealworms? Her name is Toad, by the way, and she's 7 years old. Yeah?
Whenever you said that she could absorb like your sanitizer and all that, is it true that they can drink out of their back?
Yes, they can also absorb water through their bodies too. So if you are ever out in a stream and you see a salamander or a frog or a toad and you want to say hi, please either don't touch it or make sure your hands are really, really, really clean and damp with the stream that the water that the guy is in. Because otherwise, if you've got sanitizer or bug spray or sunscreen on your fingers, you could get that animal really sick. But how many of you have heard that touching a toad will give you warts?
Yeah, it's not.
It's not true. Do you know what it's called when you hear a story that people tell you that they think is true but isn't actually true? Not necessarily a hoax, but a myth. So that's a myth. There's a lot of myths surrounding animals, and I hope that I dispel some of them for you today. Do you guys have any questions on toad here?
So about when you were talking about salamanders,
There's
some salamanders around here who actually, they like the dampness, but they also like wood heat. Like they'll lay on
wood heat. Now, I'm so glad you said that. Why do you think that wood is hot?
because they, because of the sunlight and they need energy for it.
The sunlight, but also those decomposers. In that wood, there's lots of bacteria that's breaking down dead wood, and it is producing heat. The bacteria is producing a lot of heat. Isn't that cool? All right, I believe you guys are going to recycling after this, which is in the brick building. And I think so, yes. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.